Wow, this is a very intense piece of artwork.
There's not a lot of imagery of the death march, and my mom participated in this. She was in slave labor camps, and then she marched from those camps to Bergen-Belsen. Yeah, people just let it happen, you know. And I never met my grandparents on either side because they all perished either before, during, or in the early days of the war.
Jake, we
Yes.
are here at Upside Down, which is Jews for Jesus coffee shop and gallery in Westwood, Los Angeles. And I'm drinking some really good matcha. Displayed on the walls here is artwork that you created chronicling your family's journey in the Holocaust, because both of your parents are Holocaust survivors.
We were refugees. I was born in France, and this is a narrative self-portrait of my mother's story.
Is this
Yeah.
your mother?
Yeah, this is on a travel document that my mom, this is actually the same document.
Do you actually,
Right.
you really resemble her.
Really?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, actually, I figured out that according to the document and everything, she was pregnant with me when that photo was taken.
That's unbelievable. Wow.
And the photo is, I didn't really capture it. She really had a life about her in that particular picture. I really liked. This is a portrait, self-portrait of my father's story, and this is from a photograph of my father reading a Yiddish newspaper. And this is my dad. I was trying to visually work on it and stuff. And so my dad was born in Poland. He was beat up by the Gestapo, by the Germans. And he fled to Russia. And he joined the army. And it says he survived the Holocaust. So that's it in a nutshell. He was a year in Siberian prison camp. That's what the polar bears are all about. And so he would talk about the cold and the bears sometimes. I was taught that child survivors, and she was 11 when the war started, that they tend to even block out
Yeah.
memories.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sure.
so it was kind of, I had to piece some things together.
I have heard that your mother's story is actually a bit famous and that you share it in Holocaust museums and you share it at events. I've never heard it. I'd really love to hear about her journey and how it came to be that she survived the Holocaust.
I had a very special mother. My parents, we were refugees. I was born in France, and their worlds were torn apart. Both my parents were born in Poland, but they didn't meet there. They met looking for survivors that might have lived after the war. People trying to find each other, picking up the pieces. So she was 11 when the war started.
Wow.
The Germans came in and they actually changed names. The name Lodz was the name of the second largest city in Poland. They renamed it Litzmannstadt after a World War I general. And they very shortly gathered the people into what's called a ghetto. It was a European phenomenon where Jewish people were forced in a very tight, contained space. And the Lodz ghetto was fenced in, but she didn't come out with anything from the war. One of the ways that she learned English was by some people who'd come door to door, and she asked for a Polish Bible. And she said that she read through the Bible 7 times. So she would compare a Polish Bible with an English Bible. And she became a believer in Jesus.
Before
Well,
the war
she was-
or after the war?
She always credited God for bringing her through, for preserving her, So it wasn't until after I became a believer, when I was 20 in 1976, that she started attending church with me. My mom fancied herself a poet, and she would hand out these binders and poetry that she wrote. She'd tell stories about how she took some books, and she would trade people. She had like a little bitty library, sort of like the one that Sam put together here, and she'd have, if you wanted one of her books, you'd have to bring two. So she'd build her library that way. That's the way her mind worked for the most of the war. And that she wrote poetry.
Yeah.
And she would write poems about the one that was in charge of the ghetto, Rumkowski.
And it's shocking to me because people often think like, well, progress, human progress, if we just invent more things and a better education, it's going to solve all our problems. And the Holocaust, to me, just blows that idea. It was a very educated society, very, modern. How did she end up leaving the ghetto?
It was liquidated, and people were moved to Auschwitz. So she spent 13 days in Auschwitz. And so it was she and her sister were still together. So they were selected. She'd talk about the showers and this and that and these kind of things. That would be after the Auschwitz. She worked in a place called Bad Fudova and Graben. Those were both separate. They would have factories associated with them. And she would harvest flax. And flax is used to make linen and things like that. But she would take the flax seeds and she'd chew on them. And that would
nourish her.
Yeah. And also if she was in a farm, maybe she would smuggle some potatoes and share it with people. She was always all about trying to share what she had. So the course was, most of the war she was in the Lodz ghetto. And she was still with her sister, Auschwitz, and she was basically selected to live, and they deported her to, there were like 97 sub-camps from this Gross Rosen, it's called, labor camps, and this is a lot of the way that the Germans kept supplies going. So she was in Bad Fudova, she was in Graben, but then towards the end of the war, she was on a death march between there and a place called Bergen-Belsen.
Wow, this is a very intense piece of artwork. What does it mean to you?
Well, for one thing, these are people that are being marched through regular neighborhoods. If you look, there's fences.
Oh.
Think about it. I mean, there are neighbors that are looking on and seeing. There's not a lot of imagery of the death march, and my mom participated in this. She was in slave labor camps, and then she marched from those camps to Bergen-Belsen. And also her younger sister was with her. And she did not survive the war. None of my mom's family survived.
What does the gold represent?
The gold represents God's presence. It says that he dwells in thick darkness. Many times in Scripture, it says that the Lord dwells in thick darkness. So the question is, and actually post-Holocaust theologians have wrestled with this, where was God question. And Hester Panim means hiding the face. So there's this idea that, that it's in the book of Esther, that God's name is not in the book of Esther, but that he's in the background somewhere. Right. It's harder to see that there. I mean, it's easier to see it in the book of Esther than it is to see it in the Holocaust. Yeah. Of course, you have the birth of the state of Israel afterwards. But we all wrestle with these things, personally, with tragedy and such. So you see this this little turtle dove. So I use the dove imagery and the gold to represent God's presence in the midst of a horrible situation. It was like nicknamed the death march because so many people would die.
Because they would just walk.
And when I grew up, we would make jokes. That's the way we would deal with the Holocaust. We'd make jokes about it. We're on a long walk, and it's a death march,
Yeah.
or if we had a problem, even me and my wife Jeannie and our family, we'd blame stuff on the Holocaust.
You know what? I think that's very Jewish. We find joy even in like the darkest things. We find humor. One of the things that struck me the most in your artwork was the people on the death march, and they're just walking through neighborhoods. Like, I never pictured it like that. Could you imagine you're sitting on your front porch and seeing people march by, being marched to death? And it just is such a reminder how much we can't stand quietly by as evil happens. We have to engage with what's happening in the world around us and speak up for people who can't speak for themselves.
Yeah. People just let it happen. There are many stories about how people were hidden in the war. As a photographer that I'm showing with here, and his mom knew Anne Frank, and that's their story, about being hidden. But my mom was not. She went through all the labor camps, and she even got reparations from Germany afterwards. That helped us come over to the United States.
So this painting is called Annette's Father's Hands. So tell me what that must be this hand.
Yes.
But who are these people?
And Annette is somebody that I work with, and she's got some Holocaust background as well, but her people got out before. But most of the people in this, they've got this beautiful family portrait, and her father was showing me this portrait, and I was catching some photos, and I used one of them for this particular painting. Most of the people in this beautiful picture perished in the Holocaust.
It's heartbreaking. So Jake, this is a self-portrait.
Yeah.
And this is your father, and what is he reading here?
It looks like he's reading a Yiddish newspaper. It's probably called Die Welt, The World. And there were different iterations. I was looking things up on it. But, it was probably like a Zionist newspaper that was printed for a little while.
Yeah.
And it was probably really early when things were getting bad. And I used this this was my first kind of foray into this whole series of painting that I can burn. Okay, this is a cemetery, Arielle, and this cemetery is a cemetery that my grandmother is buried in. And I didn't know. I mean, she probably doesn't know the big headstone. I've never been there, and I never met my grandparents on either side, because they all perished either before or during, or in the early days of the war, World War II.
And I love how
cool.
the dove that was there in the death march and the gold, it shows the continuity of God's presence. So maybe say more about, where do you see God's hand in your mother's life and how that's translated to how you express your faith today?
My mom was always a believer in God, and she came to eventually believe in Jesus. That when I understood the good news that I can have forgiveness from the things that I did wrong, that God really worked in history, that these things in the Bible really happened, the things we read about in Passover, there really was a Moses and everything. Because there was times in my life where I didn't know what I believed, but I'd talk to the sky or whatever. And at one point I told God, if this is true, you made me, you can communicate with me, and I'll do that. Even though when I was young, I decided I'd never do drugs, and I decided I'd never believe in Jesus.
Don't do drugs, don't believe in Jesus.
Right.
So where did you get that idea that believing in Jesus was potentially ruining your life?
Well, my parents did not agree on Jesus. I told you earlier that my mom was open to the Bible, the whole Bible, Genesis to Revelation. She was open to it. She learned English from reading through the Bible like 7 times. And she would go to church with people if they'd take her there, she'd go. But they caused a lot of friction in my household. They had a lot of fights, you know. But my father made sure that we had a Jewish education, and we always belonged to Orthodox synagogues. And I actually kept up with my Hebrew and such, probably primarily because I'm a believer in Jesus. And it was important. I was told that you can be Jewish and believe in Jesus. Part of that kind of took a roadblock out of the way, you know, because if he is who he claimed to be, then it just means that God came through with a promise that he gave to Abraham, first place. And he's a real God, and he really does these things, you know. You prove in the book by the book. And later on, I realized and learned that the Bible is a whole collection of books written over the course of over 1,000 years, 1,600 years, with all these authors. But you read it, and the more and more I know about it, the more it all is woven together with one author, with one real theme.
There's people watching who are in that place of maybe this is true that Jesus is the Messiah for our people, but the cost is just too high. The price you have to pay is just too much. What would you tell that person who's in that place?
It's worth it. He is true. And you saw that the cemetery painting, you know, that's something that we're all going to be, you know, I'm going to be 70 years old. So I remember when I became a believer, I was 20.
You don't have to have it all figured out. Maybe you don't know what's going to happen if you commit your life to Jesus, and that's okay. Just take the next baby step on the journey of seeking God and knowing him. And I think that's a great word to give to everyone who's watching today. Whatever place you're at in your relationship with the Lord, keep going. Just take the next baby step and God will be faithful. Thank you so much for joining us to hear this incredible story. And please like and subscribe and share this, and we'll see you soon.